This is the one that started it all. It's a 1984 GT18. This was the 80 to 84 body style, just before they went to more flat front end. So it's styled like the cars from that time. Always remind me of like a Fox body Mustang or an F-150 from that time. My grandparents bought this new when I was like a year old, and I got a lot of memories with this tractor. I always liked this thing. It's done a lot of work in its life, has a lot of hours on it. No idea how many, but it's been used. When he got his new, my grandfather got his new John Deere, decided to give this to me. He gave up on this because the engine wore out, and it wore out. And what it would do is it'd make a terrible knocking noise at any speed, but idle it was terrible. It would sound like the cam or the valves, but what it was stemming from is a worn out PTO or crankshaft bearing on the flywheel side. That's usually where these blocks wear, and that is the block. I mean, you have to have special tools to change out that bearing. But this also had worn out valve guides. It had a terrible smoking problem. Rings were shot. Just about anything you could think of, the engine was just wiped out. This engine's actually a 1987 of the same model from another newer Craftsman that I bought off of somebody, but I have the tins on it from the original engine. 42 cubic inch. This was the last year for the adjustable main jet on this carburetor. Later on during 1984 they went to a non-adjustable, it was a fixed jet, but this one you can actually adjust in addition to the idle mix adjustment on the side there. It's interesting to note these machines was the last machine that Sears used any fiberglass on as far as the body. Also has the Pto Mule Drive is in the corner here, so that's where it actually engages when you move the lever to engage the deck. That's from the Suburban days. And also they did away with this design later on. This is that funky built-in chute that was actually metal. It was part of the deck, so it always stuck way out. Kind of gets in the way, but it's interesting, I guess. And it's the older type of design where it has another belt kind of covered up by this metal here. This is a roper through and through. One of the very late ropers, I guess you'd say, because a few years later it would have been totally AYP that would have been making these machines. For what I understand, AYP was Sears. I mean, it was more or less a Sears exclusive manufacturing. So what was AYP is basically they did their bidding for Craftsman, for Sears, to build things to their spec. These rear wheels and tires are actually from I think one of my other GTs. This is a little bit wider. This is supposed to have 7-inch wide tires. These are 10.5s. The original Sears tires were on this when he gave it to me, but they were really leaky, and they were pretty cool. They were like, and you can't find tires like that anymore. They were like a turf saver, but there was more space in between the treads, and these treads stuck out more, so it was almost like a knobby tire to an ATV. And it was a really good tread because they would dig in when you really need them to. when you get stuck or something, but in most places they wouldn't do any damage and you couldn't even tell you drove over it. It was really a good compromise between this and, you know, like an ATV tire, I guess. Here's something that was a little bit different that they don't do anymore. This was actually a plug-in terminal connector, and what you do, you could buy a tester from Sears and you could plug it in and you could test different circuits. I guess your output and your continuity between different places and whatever. It was just something to test with. Every now and then you see the testing set for these things. They come up on eBay sometimes. I really like these manual PTOs. They're very reliable. Every now and then you gotta adjust the spring tension in the front there so that engages and keeps the belt under the right tension, but they really are good. It's much easier to keep going than electric PTO. They don't cost as much to fix. I actually have a replacement muffler to put on this, but and I got on eBay and it was in really good shape. I decided to hack it up and put it on my GT 5000. I just bought the red one, the 2004 model, because I needed to rig up an exhaust for it, and it actually turned out really well. So this is the original muffler again, and this thing, it's got holes all along the side here, and it's been welded, and it still sounds really good. These, I think, were a great setup for these engines. They let them breathe, and it took the tinny exhaust sound away, and it sounds pretty good. There's another thing that a lot of people don't know about Roper. They made two-cycle equipment too. Here's a pair of 3.7s with the Craftsman name. And one's a 78, the other one's a 79 model. Pretty much identical. I think they made this kind of stuff up to the mid-80s. These particular models had a built-in chain sharpener. So there was a stone in there, and then however that says in the manual, you go through the process and sharpen every link, every blade with this thing. But what I read is very few of these remain that actually have a working sharpener, because they never worked right from the beginning. They were defective. So what they would actually do is, well, from what I read, I don't know, never heard anyone else personally tell me, but online they say you take it in for warranty repair, tell them it doesn't work, the sharpener, it doesn't work right, and they intentionally break it, they disable it, they snap off. I think both of these have the same thing. This one actually has a blank off plate on it, but this one has a snapped off piece inside where the stone would have went, and somehow they disable this, then they reimburse the customer somehow by giving them, I heard, by gift certificates, they give them another saw or whatever to make up for it, because they were defective from the beginning. But these are pretty solid machines. These I think this is around 60 cc. Has decent power, doesn't rev very high. It's very old school, not many safety features, but it's solid and it's relatively lightweight for its size. They're pretty cool. I have these for basically aesthetics. I just have an appreciation because they're Roper and they're made well, and I like using them for everyday cutting. Not like I need more chainsaws. I have plenty of these things.